Thank you. Hello. I think with this mic, it's best not to have it too close, isn't it? My name's Graham Duff, and with me tonight are Jan Harlan, the producer of the film we've just seen. And Rob Ager, who is a film theorist, film analyst, is that sort
film
of thing?
analyst I usually get called.
Yeah, film analyst. And we're going to have a talk about Kubrick in general and Full Metal Jacket in particular. I think we can sit down now. So, Jan, we'll talk about Full Metal Jacket in a bit more detail shortly, but I just wanted to talk firstly about you and your involvement in Kubrick's films generally. So, your first film that you worked on with Stanley was A Clockwork Orange, is that correct?
In a way, Napoleon,
okay.
But it didn't happen. Napoleon was my first film I got involved with very much. And then MGM pulled out. And then, in fact, I bought the right to Traumnovelle. I had a contract with Warner Brothers, the first contract with Warner Brothers. And Stanley wrote the script. It was signed and sealed, but he felt he wasn't ready for it and told Warner Brothers. He had a contract. So he replaced it with A Clockwork Orange. And Traumnovelle became 30 years later, Eyes Wide Shut.
Ah.
Yeah, so that's how it works, yeah? And it was worse for him to wait 30 years because it was the most difficult film he ever made. And he liked it very much, yeah. But back to Full Metal Jacket.
Okay, so you were telling me yesterday that although Clockwork Orange was the first film that you worked on that went into production, you actually had some input onto A Space Odyssey as well, didn't you? 2001.
Yes, that was. I didn't work on 2001, but I was in Zurich at that time, and I worked with Stanley on the side a little bit for music. And he said to me, "Oh well, I'm looking for something." He had already a piece of music for it and cut it. That I want something big that comes to an end, because the most beautiful it is, the bigger it is, you can't cut it. So I looked for something, and very difficult. Brought a lot of stack of LPs, and he thought, "Oh, what is this? Richard Strauss, Thus Spoke Zarathustra." And he liked already the title. I didn't know why. And he liked it, and he used it in the film. Bum, 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 bum. That's one. So that was my first completely innocent contribution. I don't take any credit for it, but there you are.
It's a major contribution, though, isn't it?
Yeah, but they didn't know. I didn't know.
No, okay. Because the critic Kim Newman, I remember reading, he said that Kubrick's films were stories that were told as much by architecture as by narrative, which I thought, for certain films, maybe that's true, perhaps not for all. But music is an incredibly important part of Stanley's films, wouldn't you say?
Yes. In some cases, yes. I mean, not in all. But in some cases it plays a huge part. It tells a story. Barry Lyndon, for example. But yeah, all right.
So were you responsible for suggesting music for many of the films?
I was responsible for suggesting it. He chose it. Yeah. I didn't have anything to do with the final version. Yeah, that's it. I mean, I know my role.
Well, that's an interesting point, isn't it? Because people know what a director does to a degree, people know what a producer does, but what an executive producer does, that's very much open to interpretation, isn't it?
An executive producer means nothing.
Okay.
I mean, the title is absolutely nonsense, but it depends on the individual case. In my case, it was simply working with him and trying to get what he wants at the right price at the right time. I had nothing to do with the artist of filmmaking, nothing to do with what you see on the screen.
So you were a facilitator in that respect. And did you pick and choose the elements that you wanted to work on?
I suggested hopefully many things.
Yeah.
And he chose. That's as simple as that. Yeah, I enjoyed my job because I wasn't responsible, in fact, for the end product. Yeah.
So you helped create an environment in which Stanley could achieve his best work.
Yeah.
Yeah, which is no mean feat, I'm sure.
Oh, I liked it. Yeah. I liked it, yes. Yeah.
So he was known as being quite a hard taskmaster, wasn't he?
Well, he was self-critical. He was a hard taskmaster on himself first. Yeah, he was very self-critical. That's why he was so slow.
So slow, yeah.
Slow, and it took a long time, and it made a long time until he decided what films to make. So he was very self-critical. But on the other hand, his films don't disappear. Yeah. They always are. They're there. They're not always huge blockbusters, not very successful, but they don't disappear. Yeah. That's very rare for a director.
Yeah. Well, probably about 10 years ago, I interviewed Malcolm McDowell, and he said he'd worked with two geniuses in his time. One was Lindsay Anderson, and the other one was, of course, Stanley Kubrick. And he said, people forget now, because we talk about Kubrick in terms of its artistry and the detail and the level of production that went into them. He said, but what people forget is pretty much all his films were commercially successful. Yeah. They were popular art, and now we treat them as if they're art house, but they were in fact popular art. Yeah. And were you aware of his thought processes around that?
No, and neither was he. You can't outguess them. For example, very interesting is a film called Barry Lyndon, a total flop in England, a total flop in America, and altogether in the English-speaking world. Not successful in northern Germany either, and in Germany and northern Europe. Very successful in Japan. Wow. France, Italy, Spain, Portugal. Why? I don't know.
No, neither do I. But it's funny because Barry Lyndon is a film now that's quite often referred to for the shooting techniques, the shooting by candlelight and so on. Yeah. It's had a great impact in terms of the industry, perhaps more than it did, commercially. Full Metal Jacket, however, was a commercial success, wasn't it?
Oh yeah, very much. This was a big success and still is. Yeah. It is a relevant film because it focuses on young men who, in the end, dream about going home and being with their girlfriend. I mean, that's the essence of people. And that comes out in this Mickey Mouse March at the end. The Mickey Mouse March was a real problem, by the way, because we didn't have the rights to it. And, it was then high executives of Warner Brothers discussed it with Disney, and we got the clearance. But it was a big drama because Stanley said, oh, well, that's perfect. Let's use that. Not that easy.
Robert, I just wanted to talk to you about it. We were talking earlier about how, of all his films, certainly the later films, Full Metal Jacket is probably the one that's got the least focus on it, isn't it? It's not been observed in the way that the other films have. Why do you think that might be?
Well, I can mainly just go by what I've heard from other people who've seen the film, friends, family, and so on, and comments from some people earlier tonight when we had the meal. The general feedback that I've always found about the film is that the first half is very appreciated, especially because of Lee Ermey in the drill sergeant role. But the first half of the film's got like a fairly simple, at least on the surface, a simple narrative. There's only 4 or 5 characters. It's very straightforward about what is going on. Of course, there's deeper psychological things there, but you can just ignore that and just enjoy the first half on a very simple level. You get to the second half of the movie and things go crazy. Most people tell me that the first half of the film they love, and they a bit like that about the second half. Personally, I think the second half's the best. I think it's got more going on. There's lots more characters. There's a lot more themes and situations. There's stuff about military propaganda, where you've got the scenes where they're talking about how to cover the war from the military end. And it shows some of the hypocrisy that goes on with that. I thought that was a very good element. One of the things I especially like about the second half is you've got a few battle scenes, and the battle scene where it ends with 2 NVA soldiers or Viet Cong soldiers running away and getting gunned down. To me, that's like the fantasy war That's the fake version. That's where the soldiers are sort of like, they're experiencing the war as if they are in a movie. They're experiencing it like a classic war movie. And then towards the end, you get the reality kicks in, where it's like, we can't see the enemy. The Viet Cong were almost impossible to see. They were hidden everywhere. They would do surprise attacks. They were brutal. They were far more intelligent and more determined in their approach to the war. And so that's what you get at the end, is they're firing away endlessly at these buildings and hitting nothing. And it turns out to be just one female enemy sniper, you know. And of course, you got the masculinity issue there. It's a female that they're fighting. And I think that ties in with the prostitute scenes as well, where they're all getting ready to have a gangbang with a prostitute. And then that is reversed in the final scene where they are all getting shot to pieces by a female. So, I mean, that's just some of the stuff that I see going on in the second half. But I hear very few people talk about the second half in any way. Yeah.
Watching it again now, it's probably about 5 years since I'd seen it. And I was thinking, most war films, there's a very strong narrative. There's a very strong narrative in most war films. And in that film there, the second half is more like the reality for the soldiers. It's just a series of meaningless skirmishes to the extent you don't really know whether you've won or not. You don't know whether it's over or not, and it just rolls on. So Full Metal Jacket was Kubrick's third war film. So the first one, Paths of Glory, is a very earnest film. We watched it yesterday, didn't we? It's very serious. Then you got Strangelove, which is a very dark farce, isn't it? Yeah. And then this film sort of has elements of both, doesn't it, I think? Mm-hmm. Would you say?
Yeah, actually, there's one other war film of Kubrick's that I'd include, which I'd be surprised if anyone, maybe if 3 or 4 people here might have seen it, and that was Stanley's very first film called Fear and Desire. How many people have seen that here? A hand up? Oh, more than I expected. That's great. And as you probably know, it's because it was his first film, and I think he was in his early 20s, was he, when he made Fear and Desire?
Long.
Long time. Fear and Desire? Yeah, he was...
The transition of photography to the filmmaking.
Yeah. So, I mean, Fear and Desire it's not technically nearly as well executed as what we came to expect from Stanley later. But, I mean, when I was watching that film, something I found fascinating about it, which I think shows up in Full Metal Jacket and Dr. Strangelove and probably in Paths of Glory as well, is that in Fear and Desire, it's set in an unspecified war where you don't know which countries are fighting each other, which is a very unusual narrative setup for a war movie. I don't think I've ever seen it anywhere else. And I noticed that the uniforms of the soldiers on the 2 competing sides were a combination of Nazi uniforms and American soldier uniforms. He'd mixed it up between the 2 sides. So you get elements of Nazi and American uniforms on both sides. And for me, that was like a very early thing from Kubrick, where he was showing about what's called in Full Metal Jacket, the duality of man. He calls it the Jungian thing, which is where the enemies that we fight, they are part of us. We're fighting ourselves. And in Full Metal Jacket, the enemy are always shadows. You virtually never see the enemy. When the enemy are getting shot, they are just shadows on the battlefield, and you're fighting yourself. I think Stanley talked about that in 1 or 2 interviews, about the Jungian aspect of the film and how he wanted to work Carl Jung's concept of the shadow into the film. As far as I can tell, that's part of how he did it. Yeah.
One thing I was thinking watching it this time was when they meet up with, I think the character's called Mother, the guy who has I Am Become Death on his helmet. He's the twin, really, of the Leonard character, isn't he? It's like that's what Leonard may have become if he could have completed the training and gone to war, because he's a very similar sort of mindset, isn't he, that character?
Definitely, yeah. I agree with that. Adam, what do you think, yeah?
The duality of man, as he says. Yes. Yeah, well, that's what it is. And that was the whole film about. The whole film is about that. Yeah. The complete confusion and the pretense And that's why you don't see the enemy. It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
When you see them, it's a girl. Oh, yeah, completely helpless.
Yeah. I've seen it referred to as an anti-war film, but to me that doesn't really feel right. Do you think that's true? Is it an anti-war film?
I think it is.
Yeah?
I think it is, yes. Because it's all pretense. Yeah, but what do you do? I mean, these guys, they are just drawn in and somehow, I don't know why they become Marines, but where they are, for some reason, and they don't know what it really means to be in a war. And yeah, they are lost. They're lost. And even the big guy, you know, it's all bullshit.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. I mean, there's a lot in the film about masculinity as well, isn't there? And how masculinity is a construct that you either buy into or don't, or you polish it or whatever. Yeah.
And it all falls apart. It all falls apart when you see the girl.
Yeah.
At the end. Yeah, impossible.
And to a degree, they fall apart when they see the prostitute as well, don't they? Because they all, you know, they're these tough guys, and then they all get suddenly very giddy, don't they? It's similar to Paths of Glory in that there's very, very few female characters in it as well. Does that work for you?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, you see a lot of this stuff going on with some of Stanley's other films. I mean, you've got Lolita, you've got Eyes Wide Shut. There's a major issue between male-female relationships going on there. It's something that went on throughout a lot of his films. And actually, one scene that stood out to me, a very early film of Stanley's called Killer's Kiss. I think it was his second film he made. I can't remember much about the story, but there was one little scene that stood out at the end. There was two male characters who'd been sort of going at each other throughout the movie in conflict. They have a fist fight at the end. And throughout the movie, they've had like female partners, other female characters who they use against each other, if I remember rightly. And in this fist fight at the end, they're in a room full of female mannequins, and they are literally throwing the female mannequins at each other, which I thought was hilarious, you know. But yeah, I mean, in Full Metal Jacket, there's that whole issue with the prostitute is, I think that's a major shift at the narrative towards the end, because she comes along and you see her on the motorbike and she's wearing the shades and you can't see her eyes. So it's like you can't see the person there, you know. She looks like a child, doesn't she, you know? And they all get prepared to gangbang her. And then when it comes to the prostitute, sorry, I'm getting the two mixed up. When it comes to the sniper, the female sniper getting killed, you can see the eyes glaring at you as she's saying, "Shoot me." And I can't help but think that there's some sort of gang rape metaphor that's going on in that scene with the sniper. She's looking at the camera, she's saying, "Shoot me." And it's like, fuck me. Yeah, I kind of get that vibe about it. There's weird things going on there, like when Joker shoots the sniper and he reaches his hand out, and it's very, very slowly done. The shot lasts for ages, like a minute or something. He's reaching out with the gun, and that peace symbol is on his jacket. And there's been a few bits of talk about the peace symbol throughout the film. They don't like him wearing it. And as he's reaching out to shoot the sniper, the peace symbol sort of disappears behind his collar. And at the very, very moment, it's timed to the second. And if it's a fluke, it's amazing. At the very second that peace symbol disappears, the gun goes off. I thought, can that really be an accident? I think there's deep psychological stuff going on there. Yeah.
I wanted to talk a little bit about casting, because I was reading that for this film he invited actors to send in videotapes rather than go to castings himself.
For the minor characters.
Just for the minor characters. Oh, okay. It looked through 3,000 cassettes, is what I read. I don't know if that's true. Could I just ask you about casting generally? What was Kubrick's approach to casting? Was he? I'm presuming he was very fastidious.
He was very fussy, yes, but I mean, the principal cast was relatively easy, but the secondary cast, where you need different colors, and yeah, that's very difficult. They have to be right. And Lee Ermey, for example, is a very interesting example. That's the drill instructor. The drill instructor was not an actor. He was a drill instructor. He was actually a Marine who was no longer in the Marine. He was discharged, and he had a job in a security man in a power station. Yeah. But a New York office had the names of all these people who looked for other jobs, and I talked to the guy in New York, and he said, well, there's one guy, we wanted somebody who also served in the Marines, in the Vietnam, and was a drill instructor. And he came up with Lee Ermey, who was absolutely qualified, and he liked very much the idea of getting a different job and coming to England. The whole film was shot in England, by the way. And so he came, and he fitted the bill, and he told the extras that we had hired how to do it, because nobody knows how to do this. Nobody, including Stanley, knows how to do this with a rifle and turning it around. And I mean, this is, you have to learn this. This is like practicing the piano, you know. You have to learn this over many, many weeks. And he was fairly on top of it. And it's interesting that he then got a uniform. He went to wardrobe and got himself a uniform. Was the only guy who had a uniform. Very strange. Anyway, and then while he was doing this, he shouted at them. I mean, this was not, he fell back into his role. Yeah, yeah. It's very interesting. And he used the language that was not in the script. I mean, unbelievable. And so Stanley heard this and said, oh, let me talk to him. Lee, I mean, did you really say that? Say what, sir? You know, I mean, yes. And Stanley in the end adopted lines from Lee Ermey in the script, because he couldn't think of that either. I mean, yeah, absolutely perverse. But yeah, well, there you are. And then he was an actor, and he was very happy to do this. But Leon Vitali had to teach him how to stick to the same line, because you can't edit it. Otherwise, once you have it, you got to stick to it. And so that was a lot of work. Leon trained him, and he was really a trained puppet in the end. But he made a career afterwards. He made other films, and we did him a great favor.
Yes.
Yeah, much better, and much better paid than in a power station security guard. Yeah. No, and he was very good, actually. Yeah, yeah.
So when they're doing they're sort of jogging along, and they're doing I don't know what you call them, the little call and response songs, did that all come from Lee Ermey?
What?
All the soldiers are sort of jogging along. And
the marching songs.
Marching songs, yeah. So did that come from Lee?
I don't know where the text comes from. I don't remember that. Okay. That's too long ago.
I'm sorry.
I don't know. But Stanley, could be. I mean, Vivian also had to do with it. She did, but I don't know.
And just following up on what you were saying earlier, it was all shot in London, wasn't it? And it's very well disguised. So what were some of the issues you had in terms of making London look like Vietnam?
Well, Stanley didn't travel. I mean, he did not want to leave England. He hated flying, and anyway, so he wanted to do it in London. That is the reason. Now, he found this power station, which was which was closed down after the First World War. Right. It was a gas. What do you call a gas station?
Yeah, power station.
Yeah. Power station. And so we negotiated and said, fine, you're welcome. You can take all the buildings down. It doesn't matter. We have to take it down anyway. And so he was very happy with it. And then we had to build. Our big thing was the palm trees. I bought 50 palm trees in Spain, which we brought in 3 at a time on a low loader, and put them in a skip, a building skip. Yeah. They were planted there, and you had a big crew who made big holes and to plant the palm trees. Now, they had to move around the palm trees. That's the problem, because depending where you set up the camera, you see in the background London. And that's not possible. So everything has to be always palm trees, fire, smoke. Very important. There were a bit too many fires, a bit too much smoke, but it was all for camouflaging the background. But I think it worked very well. Yeah. And it doesn't matter whether it is Vietnam or London. It's irrelevant. It's a story that counts, the script that counts. And Stanley was very, very careful scripting it all. And yeah, it has to be theatrical. That's fine. I mean, the beginning, the first time is, of course, it's not realistic. Lee Ermey wasn't realistic, but he was realistic over 8 weeks. He was just not realistic in 20 minutes. Yeah, and so that's the art of filmmaking, to compress something into a theater performance, which is fine. Yeah.
So this probably sounds like a really fanboy question, but what's of the 5 films you worked on with Stanley, which is the one that you hold in the highest regard?
Eyes Wide Shut, on the one I worked. But my favorite film is 2001. I didn't work on it. Yeah, Eyes Wide Shut is a great film. It's a very, very difficult film. It's a difficult film for the audience too. It was not successful. The audience basically rejected it because it comes too close to the people. It's a film about jealousy, and everybody in the audience is an expert. Everybody is an expert, and they don't like it. People subconsciously don't like to be told what they are. And that's why it was not successful. But in the meantime, it came up in the charts, and people get used to it more. Yeah. So.
That's
Eyes Wide Shut is my favorite in that respect. It's also the last film I made with him, so yeah, it's important. Yeah, and a great cast. I mean, Tom Cruise was wonderful to work with. Nicole Kidman was. I mean, they're all fantastic actors. Yeah.
It's a film that, like all his films, really, he's got some very iconic scenes in that you see referenced again and again. And we were talking about this earlier, weren't we? How about a month ago, I took my youngest son, who's 16, to see The Shining. He'd never seen it before, but he's seen lots of The Simpsons. And The Simpsons reference Stanley Kubrick's films constantly. Yeah. And I was sitting with him, and every few minutes he was going, "Oh," because he was recognizing something that had been referenced elsewhere. And Stanley Kubrick's films are probably amongst the most referenced films in other media, aren't they?
Yeah,
I would say.
I think so too.
Yeah, definitely. I think, what's the time? We should probably throw it open to the audience. Has anybody got any questions for Jan or Rob?
I've got a question for Jan.
Oh, yeah, hang on. I'll go ahead.
I'm trying to remember Ready Player One, that movie, the Steven Spielberg, Ready Player One. Yeah. It had a load of Shining references in the film. It had a river of blood, and it had all that kind of stuff. I found that, I didn't love the film, but I found all that fascinating. And I thought, well, they must have had the permissions from Warner Brothers and yourself, the Kubrick estate, to get those scenes into the film. And could you tell us something about that, how that came about, and what do you think of it?
Well, Stanley and Steven Spielberg admired each other, because Stanley could never make a Steven Spielberg film, and Steven Spielberg couldn't make a Stanley Kubrick film. So it's a natural liking each other, like he liked Woody Allen. He loved Woody Allen. He saw Radio Days 3 times because he couldn't make such a film. And that's okay. He liked very much other directors. He admired them. I mean, like Jan Tröll and Edgar Reitz with Heimat, and he just loved it. And so that was a typical state of him. Now, for Steven Spielberg, I can just say they liked each other, and he offered the film the last film that he never made to Stephen at the time, although we prepared AI for a year, he then offered it to see that he would be the better director for that. No question. Also, he shied away from this huge technical production that he needed. And then Stephen came, and they loved it, and they saw all the drawings, and wonderful. But Stephen had other plans. Oh, well, okay. And then, however, Stanley focused on Eyes Wide Shut, because that was really his interest. And so he let AI go. And I'm very grateful to Stephen that he did AI after Stanley's death. He picked it up and made a wonderful film of it. Different. It's a Steven Spielberg film. It's okay. That's what Stanley wanted. But all the key elements were there. I mean, yeah, the little boy and the, what is the other, the Pinocchio character. That was all in Stanley's script already. So it was very faithful to him. Yeah.
Were there many changes in the script?
Oh yes, it was a new script.
Ah, okay.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. It was a script that fitted Steven Spielberg's emotions, which are different. So she should be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, you said earlier that
I'm hard of hearing. I'm hard of hearing. I can't.
Sorry, I can repeat it if you want.
yeah, you said earlier that Stanley was very self-critical. That's why he worked slowly.
Absolutely.
Do you have a sense of what he thought of his films? What he thought of his own films after they were finished?
Yes. He was happy with them. Right. He was happy with them, but once they were finished, they were finished. He never went back. But he was basically happy with his films. Yeah, he was happy with Barry Lyndon. He was very disappointed that everybody hated it and thought it was slow and irrelevant. Well, there's nothing you can do. You know, Picasso was so criticized about his paintings and the different styles. But what can you do? Nothing.
Yeah, that's a lot. Can you? Oh, bless you. Thank you.
I can shout and then you can repeat it.
Oh, it's too late now.
It's a question for Jan. Are there any projects that you wanted to make or would still like to make that Stanley Kubrick either didn't want to do or you'd like to do with someone else?
Are there any projects that you had in development with Stanley that you wanted to do that didn't come to fruition, or projects you've had with other people?
Yes, yes.
What would have liked to have done?
Or would have liked to have done with Stanley?
He would have liked to do a musical, which
Wow.
he never got around to it. He actually wanted to see a film very early on, Eric Bright Eyes. That's a story by Sir Rider Haggard. And you know, he would have to go to a northern country, and that killed it. But that's a wonderful story, operatic, totally, you know, symbolized in a witch and a beautiful woman and a hero man. So very different style. So he had many things on petto.
Could I just ask, you were talking earlier about Napoleon, that you
Yes.
did a lot of... how much time had been spent on that before it was abandoned?
2 years. Right. Huge research on Napoleon. And he was, I mean, an absolute total expert by the end of it. And he was very disappointed that MGM pulled out, because they supported the whole pre-production or the whole research. And was very disappointed for I would say for 2 weeks. Yeah, I was ready to go back to Zurich or Frankfurt or whatever, but yeah, well, my wife fell in love with England. That is also a problem. That's why one of the reasons why I like to stay, and then we did Traumnovelle, and I told you that in the beginning. Yeah, and Traumnovelle, he wrote the script and everything was fine, but he couldn't do it. He was very concerned about it. And then we came to Organised.
Was part of the reason that MGM pulled out because of the film of Waterloo had come out?
Waterloo was one thing that didn't help, but they didn't believe the budget and they didn't believe it. They already knew from 2001 that he was able to double the budget. And when you start a big movie, I mean, you have to finish it, otherwise you have nothing. Yeah. So they didn't trust him. And, well, maybe they were right. I don't know.
We'll never know, will we? Any further questions? Yes.
Question for Jan. Do you happen to know if Stanley had any specific techniques to get the actors to give a certain performance that he wanted from them?
Did Stanley have specific techniques that he would use to get performances from the actors?
Oh, time. Time he needed. For the actors, he needed time. You know, and he was absolutely, completely, I wouldn't call it reckless, but indifferent to time. I mean, if a take wasn't right, he'd do the next day, And that's why we'd had long shooting schedules. But actors he respected enormously, and he respected the fact that they tried to do the best. And it takes time sometimes. Yeah, very difficult. And he changed the texts also. They had to relearn the lines, and it was difficult. But he didn't blame anybody. He blamed only himself. I must say that he was very fair there. Yeah. And in other things, he had wonderful ideas. I mean, for example, the Steadicam was used. Before the Steadicam, it was a 2CV chassis. A 2CV is a Citroën. Here, it's a chassis. And instead of using a track on a lawn, let's say, you don't have a track, you just push the cart. It's a wobble a little bit, but it's okay. Yeah. So lots of good inventions. Yeah.
Could I just ask, you know, you're saying that they knew from 2001 that he would go over time, over budget. Yeah. As time went on, so like, say, Full Metal Jacket and Eyes Wide Shut, were they closer to the schedule, or did that never change?
No. Full Metal Jacket was okay. Yeah. It was all right. Clockwork Orange was spot on. Fine. Barry Lyndon went over budget, yes. And Eyes Wide Shut went over budget.
And what about the schedule? Did that?
Oh, schedule was enormous for Eyes Wide Shut. I mean, that's a typical. I mean, yeah, the first assistant director and myself, we prepared the first schedule. It was 18 weeks. And Stanley looked at it and said, what I mean, these are two people talking all the time. I mean, 18 weeks is much too much. It was 12 weeks. Okay, so it took a year. but he was not. He was totally honest about it, because he thought two people talking, I mean, goodness me, should be a walk in the park. But it wasn't. It was not a walk in the park. It was a very, very, very difficult film to make. And he was surprised himself, but he didn't excuse himself, and he didn't need to excuse himself. That's his style of filmmaking. It's all right. Yeah.
So what were some of the specific issues that made it last a year?
Okay, we did, for example, we did 1 week of shooting a scene, which then he totally threw out and did it in a different location with different actors. Yeah, that's yeah. I mean, it's like double it, the schedule. And there was a big scene. So it happens. But if he didn't like it afterwards, and he said, what am I thinking about? I mean, it's terrible. Yeah. And everybody thought, well, what's his problem? Well, he didn't like it. So he threw it out. And that's his prerogative. I mean, that's his right. And in the end, I shouldn't complain. So, I mean, Vermeer did about 45 paintings in his life. Nobody said he was a lousy, lazy bugger, you know. He's a fantastic painter. So, you know, it doesn't matter how many you do. Yeah.
You know what you want.
Yeah, he wants to get it right. And Eyes Wide Shut will be seen by a future generation as his masterpiece. I promise you.
Can I ask a question about Eyes Wide Shut? This one, I already know the answer to this because you've written about it before. This is something which, as far as I'm concerned, you've already answered before in the Stanley Kubrick Archives book. But I want to ask you about it because this is being filmed. And I heard there's a lot of crazy sort of rumours going around online about things with Stanley Kubrick. I heard people saying, oh, he was a 33rd degree Mason and stuff like that, which I think is garbage. But I keep seeing this rumour spread around online saying that when Eyes Wide Shut was finished, that the studio took it away, re-edited it, and removed all kinds of important scenes from the secret society portion in the middle of the film. And I keep trying to tell people online, no, that's not true. You know about how the edit of that film was finished. Would you like to explain that, how the edit was finalized?
Yeah. It's very, very simple. We had a contract with Warner Brothers which stipulated that it had to be it had to be an R rating. Otherwise, Warner Brothers they don't do it. They don't do films which are NC, whatever it's called, something else. Anyway, that means for the censor to have the scene with the orgy, so-called orgy, has to be changed. So what do we do? Stanley thought, oh, they know that this is a symbolized thing, that this is not real, but it doesn't matter. I mean, real, not real, you can't use this language and you can't see for not particular acts. Anyway, so what we did, because Warner Brothers did not want to recut it, not one frame was changed. We had to digitally superimpose more voyeurs. More voyeurs were there, and therefore the cut was changed. I mean, the film was changed because they had more of these black figures to, they were hiding, whatever it was. And anyway, so that's the answer. There's no question about it.
And if I understand correctly, you personally oversaw the finalized edit, is that right?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
And also the editor. There were a crew of people, Nicola Vitali and the editor, Nigel Gold, and myself, and also his wife. We looked at it, and it was okay. I mean, and Warner Brothers, and finally got it through. Because Warner Brothers doesn't do that. He have to go back to the censor, and the censor, okay, agreed. Because they think it's a good film. I mean, it's no doubt about it. It's a very sincere film. But that scene was not possible for them. Yeah, but it's how it is.
It'd be very different now, wouldn't it?
Yeah, no.
I don't think anybody'd raise an eyebrow now, would they?
No. But I mean, things changed, yeah.
Can I just mention something about Lolita in relation to this stuff? For those of you who've seen Lolita, or if you haven't seen it, go and see it. Stanley had a lot of troubles with the censors over that one, didn't he? It was, because he was dealing with a very dark subject matter of, child sexual abuse and stuff. And this was back in the 1950s. It was released, wasn't it? 1950s.
Child sexual abuse was not in there.
No, but it was in the original novel, wasn't it?
No.
Of Lolita.
There were no children there.
Yeah, okay. It was verging on it,
Well, age inappropriate.
Yeah. But there was a censorship issue with Lolita where Stanley couldn't put across a lot of the themes and narrative things that were going on that were in the Lolita novel. So he was having to try and work his way around the censor when he made Lolita. So they had to make the girl older to make it more palatable for the audience. They had to make it appear to be more of a love story instead of focusing on the sexual elements and that kind of thing. And from what I've read in the biographies of Kubrick, assuming that they're accurate, the ones that have been published, like the ones by Vincent Labruto and John Baxter, Stanley was trying to change the script of Lolita in order to get the themes in that were in the novel, the darker themes. But the censors kept noticing the metaphors and saying, no, we still won't allow that. And if you watch Lolita carefully, he did manage to slip some of this stuff through there. and get past the censors, and he had to be really underhanded in how he did it. And I think that's where Stanley really started to develop the ability to communicate in a very subliminal, getting straight to the unconscious and bypassing the conscious attention. Yeah.
That sounds good to me. That sounds very believable. I think we've probably got time for just a couple more questions if anybody has them. Yes, sir.
To your knowledge, did Kubrick ever consider making a Vietnam War film whilst the war was ongoing, or was it only afterwards that he considered something like Full Metal Jacket?
So did Stanley consider making a thank you. Did Stanley consider making a Vietnam War film whilst the Vietnam War was still going on, or was it only afterwards that became an idea?
It was afterwards. It was as a fact afterwards. So I don't know whether he thought about it during the war, but it was later, yes.
Yeah. Okay. Yes.
Are there any updates on the new proposed miniseries on Kubrick's Napoleon script? That I think HBO have been developing it for some recent years.
Okay. Are there any updates on a HBO series which is about Stanley's Napoleon project?
At the moment it's on hold. We have a script finished, wonderful, 6 hours, 6 chapters. The director we had in mind dropped out, unfortunately. It was Cary Fukunaga. And right now, we have to see how it goes. And Steven Spielberg said he was going to look for a director good for this Napoleon. And so maybe it happens. Maybe it happens in 2 years, in 3 years after my life. I mean, I don't know, it doesn't matter. It could be. Because it's a story that is incredibly important. Napoleon is such a unique figure in European history, bad and good, a man who is a genius, and at the same time he ruins himself by revenge. Revenge revenge and jealousy belong together. They are the most poisonous things in a human life. And so this is a very complex story. And that's why it's so interesting. And Napoleon is ideal for that. But it will happen. I'm sure it will happen. Maybe I'm no longer around, but it will be one day in the future. If the world stays, and if the catastrophe right now in the Middle East doesn't go bigger and bigger, and we are all going under.
And on that bombshell, I think we'll say goodnight. So thank you for coming along tonight. Thank you to Jan Harland, and thank you to Rob. Real pleasure.
Thanks, Jan.
Thank you.